Imagine you are standing at the edge of a cliff. The wind hits your face with the smell of burning stone and ancient ash. You look down, and what you see is not a valley, it is a city. Or what remains of one. Walls the height of mountains, cracked open like eggshells. Towers that once pierced the clouds now lie broken across the earth like the bones of gods. Silence fills everything. A silence so heavy it feels like it has weight, like it is pressing against your chest. And then, slowly, you begin to understand. This city was not abandoned. This city was not forgotten. This city was destroyed. And whatever destroyed it, whatever called down fire from the sky and shattered these colossal walls, was not a human army. Nothing human could have done this. Because nothing human built this city in the first place. This is not a story that begins with the flood. This is a story that begins long before that, in the deepest and most forgotten layers of the world antediluvian, a world that existed 4,500 years before the great waters came. A world ruled by giants. A world corrupted by the Nephilim. A world where the fallen angels had already changed everything. And a world where God looked down and decided that certain cities, certain civilizations, had to be erased from existence before the flood even came. The Book of Enoch speaks about this. The ancient traditions speak about this. The oldest manuscripts found in the caves of the Dead Sea speak about this. And the story they tell is one of the most epic, most terrifying, and most mysterious stories in the entire history of the ancient world. To understand the cities destroyed by God, you first have to understand who built them. And to understand who built them, you have to go back to a moment that changed the world antediluvian forever. A moment described in the Book of Enoch with a precision that still sends chills through historians and scholars of ancient texts. The moment when 200 watchers, the fallen angels, descended from the sky onto the summit of Mount Hermon and made a pact. A covenant of rebellion. They swore an oath to one another, these fallen angels, that they would descend into the world of men. That they would take human women as their own. And that whatever came from that union, whatever creatures emerged from the mixing of the divine and the mortal, they would teach, nurture, and guide. The ancient world antediluvian would never be the same again. Because from that union between the fallen angels and the daughters of men came the Nephilim. The giants. The colossal beings that the Book of Enoch describes with a terrifying specificity, beings of enormous stature, beings whose appetites could not be satisfied, beings whose very presence on the earth changed the landscape of civilization. The Nephilim were not simply large men. They were something else entirely. They were something the ancient world had never seen before and would never see again. Hybrid creatures born of two worlds, the celestial and the terrestrial, walking the earth with the weight of mountains and the hunger of storms. And the fallen angels taught them everything. This is what the Book of Enoch makes clear in passage after passage. The Watchers, those fallen angels who had descended and made their covenant on Mount Hermon, brought with them knowledge that was not meant for the ancient world. Azazel taught mankind how to make swords and shields and breastplates, how to work metals extracted from the earth, how to create instruments of war that the ancient world antediluvian had never imagined. Semyaza and his companions taught enchantments and the cutting of roots. Others among the fallen angels taught astrology, the movement of stars, the reading of celestial signs. Knowledge that was, according to the Book of Enoch, forbidden. Knowledge that belonged to a realm beyond the ancient world. And this forbidden knowledge, poured into the hands of beings already colossal, already hybrid, already beyond the boundaries of what the world was meant to contain, produced something extraordinary. Something terrible. The cities of the Nephilim. Picture what a city built by the Nephilim would look like. Not with the eyes of a modern person, but with the eyes of an ordinary man from the ancient world antediluvian, a man of average height, perhaps 5 feet tall, standing at the gates of a city built for beings whose shoulders reached the height of cedar trees. The walls alone would be enough to destroy comprehension. Blocks of stone so massive that even today, in the ruins of the most ancient civilizations, archaeologists stare at them and ask the same question that ancient peoples must have asked: how was this moved? How was this placed? Who had the strength, the technology, the will to put these stones in this exact position? The ancient world is full of structures that have never been adequately explained by conventional theories. And the tradition of the Nephilim, preserved in the Book of Enoch and in ancient texts from cultures as different as the Mesopotamian, the Egyptian, and the Hebrew, offers an answer that conventional scholarship is reluctant to examine. The giants built them. The fallen angels taught them. And the cities of the ancient world antediluvian were, in many ways, monuments to a civilization that was never supposed to exist. Inside these colossal cities, the Nephilim lived according to laws that had nothing to do with the laws that governed ordinary humans. The Book of Enoch is specific about this. The giants began to consume all the food that the ancient world could produce, the labor of human beings, the harvest of fields, the produce of every orchard and every river. And when the food ran out, they turned to the animals. And when the animals were not enough, they turned to one another. And some traditions speak of things darker still, of the Nephilim consuming human beings, of the fallen angels creating hybrid creatures that served as instruments of power and terror. The ancient world antediluvian was not a paradise. It was a world in which the Nephilim had become a force of consuming darkness, and ordinary human beings existed in the shadow of these colossal civilizations with no way to resist, no way to flee, and no one to call upon. This is where the story becomes something that crosses the boundary between mythology and something that feels far more urgent. Because the ancient traditions, the Book of Enoch, the texts of the ancient world, the oral traditions preserved across dozens of cultures, all converge on a single point. A point at which the cries of ordinary human beings, crushed beneath the civilization of the Nephilim, reached a threshold that could not be ignored. The Book of Enoch says it with remarkable directness. The souls of men cried out. Their voices went up to heaven. And heaven responded. For archangels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, looked down upon the ancient world antediluvian from above. And what they saw caused them to act. They saw the blood that was being shed. They saw the corruption that the fallen angels had introduced. They saw the cities of the Nephilim rising above the plane of the ancient world like blasphemies carved in stone. And they brought their report before the throne of God. The judgment that followed was not the flood. The flood would come later, it would come as the final cleansing of a world that had been corrupted beyond recovery. But before the flood, there was something else. Before the waters, there was fire. Before the global destruction of the world antediluvian, there was the targeted, precise, and devastating destruction of specific cities. The cities of the Nephilim. The cities built by the fallen angels and their hybrid offspring. The cities that had become centers of corruption, of forbidden knowledge, of the darkest practices that the ancient world had ever seen. Which cities were these? The Book of Enoch does not always give coordinates. The ancient world antediluvian did not use maps in the way that we understand them today. But the traditions preserved in the Book of Enoch and in related ancient texts point toward regions that are specific enough to be geographically meaningful. The plains between the great rivers, the Tigris and the Euphrates, where Mesopotamian traditions also preserve memories of a time before time, a time of hybrid rulers, of beings who descended from the sky and brought civilization and catastrophe together. The valleys below the mountains of the ancient world, the regions where, even today, archaeologists uncover structures whose construction defies explanation. The coastlines of ancient seas that no longer exist in the same form. These were the territories of the civilizations lost, the lost civilizations of the Nephilim, the cities that God destroyed 4,500 years before the flood. Imagine standing outside one of these cities on the night before its destruction. You are a traveler, a human being, small and fragile by the standards of the world antediluvian. You have walked for days to reach this place, drawn by rumors of its power, its wealth, its impossible architecture. And now you stand at its gates in the darkness before dawn, and everything you have heard is true. The walls rise above you into the night sky like the walls of a canyon. The gates are made of materials that you have no name for, metal alloys that the fallen angels taught the Nephilim to forge, substances that catch the moonlight in ways that ordinary iron and bronze do not. Through the gates, you can see the lights of the city, fires burning in towers, illuminating streets wide enough for beings of colossal stature to walk without touching the walls. You can hear sounds from within, sounds that are not music, not quite, but something that resonates in the bone. And the smell that reaches you is complex and ancient and carries within it something that makes the instinctive animal part of your brain want to turn around and run. You do not know it yet, but this will be the last night this city exists. By morning, what stands before you, these impossible walls, these colossal towers, these streets built for giants, will be rubble. The fire will come down from the sky, and it will not be lightning in the ordinary sense. It will be something more deliberate. Something more total. The destruction of the cities of the Nephilim, as described in the traditions of the ancient world, was not random or collateral. It was surgical. It was specific. It was the response of a divine judgment to a specific and irredeemable corruption. And when it was over, nothing remained that could be used. Nothing remained that could be repurposed. Only ruins. Only the kind of ruins that, thousands of years later, would cause ordinary human beings to stand before them and ask, who built this? And why is it broken like this? And what happened here? The Book of Enoch is not the only ancient text that preserves memories of this. The traditions of the ancient world antediluvian echo across cultures that had no known contact with one another and yet arrived at remarkably similar conclusions. The Mesopotamian texts speak of a time before the flood when hybrid rulers, beings who were part divine, part human, governed cities of extraordinary power and were eventually swept away. The Sumerian king lists record dynasties of beings who reigned for thousands of years before the flood, followed by a clean break, a new beginning, a world reconstituted after catastrophe. Egyptian traditions preserve memories of a time before the time of ordinary kings, a time of beings who were larger, more powerful, more connected to divine forces than ordinary humans. And indigenous traditions from cultures separated by oceans, from the Americas to the Pacific Islands to the highlands of Africa, speak of a time when giants walked the earth, when the sky fell, when civilizations that were too powerful to be merely human were destroyed by forces from above. What does this convergence mean? It means that the memory of the Nephilim, the memory of the cities they built, and the memory of their destruction is not confined to the Book of Enoch alone. It is embedded in the ancient world at a level so deep that it survived every catastrophe, every migration, every collapse of civilization that followed the world antediluvian. The memory of the giants and the fallen angels and the cities of impossible architecture was too powerful to be forgotten entirely. It was too fundamental to the human experience of the world before the flood to be erased. It survives in every culture that preserved its oldest stories. And those oldest stories all say the same thing: there were giants. They built cities. And God destroyed them. The question that haunts anyone who spends serious time with the Book of Enoch and the related traditions of the ancient world is this: what specifically did the cities of the Nephilim do to merit destruction rather than merely condemnation? What crossed the threshold from tolerable wickedness to the kind of irreversible corruption that required divine fire before the global flood? The Book of Enoch provides several answers, and they are remarkable for their specificity. First, the corruption of genetic inheritance, the mixing of the fallen angels with human women and the creation of hybrid creatures that the ancient world was never designed to contain. The Nephilim were not merely large and violent. They were, according to the Book of Enoch, a biological catastrophe, a disruption of the order of creation so fundamental that it could not be allowed to continue indefinitely. Second, the corruption of knowledge. The fallen angels had taught the ancient world secrets that belonged to a different order of existence. Weapons. Poisons. Enchantments. The manipulation of natural forces in ways that the world antediluvian was not equipped to handle responsibly. And the cities of the Nephilim were the places where all of this forbidden knowledge was concentrated, practiced, and refined. Third, and perhaps most disturbing, the corruption of worship. The ancient texts suggest that the cities of the Nephilim had become centers of practices that inverted the order of creation, that directed reverence toward forces that had no legitimate claim to it, that established a kind of anti-civilization, a city structure devoted to the deepest possible corruption of everything that the ancient world was supposed to be. And so the fire came down. The archangels carried out their orders. And the cities of the Nephilim, those colossal, impossible, terrifying monuments to the civilization that should never have existed, were reduced to the kind of ruins that would puzzle and haunt every subsequent generation of human beings who stumbled across them. But what happened to the Nephilim themselves? The Book of Enoch's answer to this question is one of the most fascinating elements of the entire tradition of the ancient world. The Nephilim who were destroyed in the divine judgment of the cities did not simply cease to exist. Their bodies were destroyed, their colossal physical forms, which had walked the earth of the world antediluvian with such devastating effect, were ended. But their spirits, the spiritual component of these hybrid creatures, born of the union of fallen angels and human women, could not find rest. They were, according to the Book of Enoch, something that had no place in the order of the afterlife. Not fully human. Not fully celestial. They were, in the language of the ancient text, evil spirits who wander upon the earth. And those evil spirits, the tradition says, are the source of a different kind of darkness that continued to afflict the ancient world even after the destruction of the cities, even after the flood, the source of affliction, of madness, of the kind of invisible corruption that no physical destruction could entirely eliminate. This is why the cities destroyed by God in the time of the Nephilim matter so much to the tradition of the ancient world. They are not simply a story of ancient civilizations lost to time. They are the origin point of a spiritual reality that the Book of Enoch insists extends far beyond the world antediluvian and reaches into every subsequent age. The fallen angels are bound, some in darkness, awaiting final judgment, as the Book of Enoch describes in passages of extraordinary vividness. But the spirits of the Nephilim, born of that ancient and forbidden union, are not bound. They wander. And every culture in the ancient world, and many cultures in our own time, has traditions that describe exactly this, wandering spirits of supernatural origin that afflict and corrupt and distort, spirits that are not quite human and not quite divine, spirits that seem to carry within them the inheritance of the world antediluvian and the corruption that God destroyed the cities to eradicate. Why do so many ancient cultures across the entire world carry memories of giants and civilizations lost in fire from the sky? Why does the architecture of the ancient world, from the megalithic structures of Europe to the colossal constructions of Mesopotamia, from the impossible stonework of South America to the ancient ruins of sites whose age we are only beginning to understand, consistently present us with structures that should not exist by conventional understanding of what ancient humanity was capable of? Why does the Book of Enoch, a text excluded from the canonical scriptures but preserved for centuries in the Ethiopian Orthodox tradition and rediscovered in multiple copies among the Dead Sea Scrolls, describe a world with such specificity, such coherent internal logic, such detailed geography and genealogy and narrative structure? These are not questions with simple answers. The ancient world antediluvian is, by definition, a world we cannot visit. The flood, whatever its ultimate nature and extent, erased the physical evidence of the civilization of the Nephilim so thoroughly that only memory and myth remained. The cities destroyed by God in the time of the Nephilim may lie beneath sediment and sea, beneath layers of time too thick to penetrate with current technology. The ruins that survive above ground may be only the smallest fraction of what once stood. And the ancient traditions that preserved their memory, the Book of Enoch, the Mesopotamian epics, the flood narratives of 100 cultures, the king lists and the genealogies and the mythological frameworks of the ancient world, are our only windows into a period of history so deep and so strange that conventional scholarship still does not have adequate language to describe it. What is certain is this. The Book of Enoch presents a coherent and deeply ancient account of a world transformed by the intervention of the fallen angels, a world antediluvian in which the Nephilim built civilizations of colossal scale, in which forbidden knowledge was disseminated across the ancient world with catastrophic consequences, in which the cries of ordinary human beings eventually reached a threshold that demanded divine response. The cities of the Nephilim were real to the authors of the Book of Enoch in the same way that Babylon and Jerusalem and Nineveh were real, not as allegories, not as metaphors, but as places that had existed in the physical world and had been physically destroyed. And the tradition that carries this memory is not a fringe curiosity. It is among the oldest preserved literature of the ancient world, copied and preserved across centuries and cultures, attested in multiple independent textual traditions, and consistent in its core claims in ways that accidental invention cannot explain. The ancient world antediluvian is gone. The Nephilim are gone. The fallen angels are bound, according to the Book of Enoch, in darkness beneath the earth, awaiting a judgment that the text describes in terms of cosmic finality. The cities they built and that God destroyed lie buried beneath whatever geology and hydrology 4,500 years of time have created above them. But the memory survives. In the Book of Enoch. In the ancient texts of every major civilization. In the architectural puzzles that the ancient world has left behind. In the strange convergence of traditions that no diffusion theory can adequately explain. The cities destroyed by God in the time of the Nephilim were real. The civilization they represented was real. And the reason God destroyed them, the corruption that had grown so total that fire from above was the only adequate response, was real. And that reality, preserved in the oldest layers of human memory, still has something to say to every generation that takes the time to listen.